I feel like I dedicated my 20s to just trying
Stuff.
so many different things. I swear I've done every job from selling pest control door to door to a puppy cuddler.
Wow.
It's it's ridiculous. Hi, my name is Jessie Sidhu. I am a global inclusion and belonging consultant as well as a storyteller.
Oh, you can read minds? Why do I feel this way?
What is therapy like? How does the brain really work?
Let's find out.
Hosted by Tolu giving brain fuel for curious minds. You're tuning into
The BrainCore podcast.
Welcome to BrainCore, the podcast that shows you what's possible with psychology. I'm Tolu, your host, and today we're starting off with a question. What would you do if you wanted to seek help, but everyone around you told you not to? Today, I'm joined by Jessie Sidhu, who is a chocolate lover, a storyteller, and also a mental health advocate. Jessie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. So tell me a little bit about that. What kind of chocolate are we talking about?
Oh, I am a hardcore Reese's Cup girly.
Okay.
I also really like Hershey's cookies and cream, but I like chocolates with things in them, apparently. Like, I don't like just plain chocolate. Any sort of chocolate that has something else with it.
Okay, that's fair. I like Toblerone.
Oh, I haven't had one in so long.
I feel like it's one of those classic chocolates that we kind of forget about.
It is very underrated.
Yeah. I was in Halifax, Nova Scotia recently with my mom, and we went into this like novelty store, and they had really odd things in the chocolate. So I got gold chocolate, which is like a caramelized milk and sugar type of chocolate, and they put in apple, pecan, and brandy.
Oh, how was it?
It's actually pretty good. That was the one I bought. So it's actually pretty good.
Sounds like a good combo. I will have to try one day.
I should have brought it. Anyways.
Next time.
So thank you again for joining me today. So one of the things I really love doing on the podcast and that we love doing on BrainCore is putting a spotlight on people who have turned pain into purpose. And so I wanted you to kind of take us back to the beginning of it all.
Yeah.
So what was that like for you growing up?
For sure. So I think for myself, I know I talk about this a lot on the podcast I go on, but I had, I would say, a pretty untraditional childhood. Unfortunately, I'm a 90s baby, so I was born in 1994, and back then there weren't a lot of mental health conversations happening. And in my family, alcoholism did run very deep on my dad's side of the family. Now, in hindsight, I can see that anxiety issues run really deeply on my mom's side of the family. And so I grew up kind of seeing these things. And especially when my parents separated, I think I took on a lot of that anxious burden as well. And so I think for me, the change kind of came when I was 16. I remember I was in my like intro to, I think it was psych, anthropology, and sociology class in high school. And I was writing down the symptoms of anxiety and depression. And as I was writing them down, I was like, I think these hit a little too close to home. And I remember I went to my mom and I was like, Mom, I think I'm depressed. And she was like, you've got great grades. You've got a good group of friends. You don't live in an abusive household anymore. What do you have to be depressed about? And it wasn't a malicious question, but more like a genuine ask of she just didn't understand. And in that point in time, I also didn't understand. So I was like, actually, you're right. Like, I don't have anything to be depressed about. So maybe I'm not depressed. Maybe this is a phase. I don't know. And then when I went to university, I started studying psych. And from there, studying psych in undergrad and just the experience of first year as well. I moved 3 hours away from home. I went to Queens. It was also not a very diverse place. And it was something that was really interesting because I'd grown up around mostly white people being kind of the only person of color or the only brown person around. And Queens was very similar, but it was the first time where I really started to be like, oh, I'm different and I struggle with things differently because I noticed my friends were getting support, or they had other people they could ask, and maybe their parents had gone to university. I was the first person in my bloodline to go to university, and that was a really hard thing. I didn't really have anyone to lean on. And so I guess long story short, in a selfish pursuit to really understand myself, I took the psych degree, started volunteering with different organizations, and that led to a fun career working with Jack.org, Kids Help Phone, and then eventually transitioning into equity and inclusion work in the last few years now.
So, long story short, you're amazing.
Thank you.
Is what I'm hearing. No, because just going back a little bit, it sounds like, you go through this experience that ordinarily people would react negatively to.
Yeah.
Right? And then you're reacting negatively to it, and the response is kind of like, why? You have everything figured out now. Like, your grades are good. So how was it for everyone else around you? Did you find that they were also reacting similarly, or did they have different strategies?
Yeah, I think for the people around me, it was a little different between family and friends. I think for my family, when I really started to struggle, I'd left the house by then. I was in university, so I did a pretty good job of hiding it from my family.
Okay.
But they would definitely notice when I come home for Christmas or for holidays, and they'd be like, "You're so irritable." Like, my sister's 9 years younger than me, and she'd be like, "You're so mean to me all the time." And I was like, and I felt so, now in hindsight, I felt so bad, but I was just going through so many things. And my friends were a little different, where my friends were the ones who were living with me at that time. And so they saw kind of that day to day and how that was affecting me. And I think especially in first year, when I went to university, which is a long time ago now, but in first year, drinking culture was a really, really big thing, and frosh week on campus. And I came from a brown household where I wasn't allowed to drink growing up at all. Like, I had never touched alcohol, and I was in this space for the first time, making my own decisions as an adult. And again, mental health wasn't talked about, so I had no idea that because I came from a family of alcoholics, I should be careful when I'm drinking, and it's a lot easier for me to get addicted to substances, etc. And so I think I had a lot of figuring out to do on my own, and I'm really thankful for my friends as well, because they saw it and they would softly, and sometimes not so softly, be like, "Hey, I don't think what you're doing is really good for you." But I think the real change for me came when I went to a presentation. It was the first time I'd seen people of color talking about mental health. And when I attended this presentation, it was two brown guys. Till this day, I don't know who they are, but they legit changed my life. I just remember sitting there, and again, like I said, Queens is a very white campus. So it was the first time where I was seeing just people of color being so open, and then they were talking about mental health, talking about what they'd gone through. And I remember sitting there being like, if they can get better, maybe I can too. And I think that principle really became my guiding light in all of the work that I do, because I come from a place where my mom very much drilled it into me, is you're not allowed to complain if you don't do something about it. And that kind of applied itself into the mental health world too. Like, I would see all these issues and be like, I can't complain about them if I don't try and do something. And I think that's kind of led to my eclectic little mix of work.
Yeah, because I mean, one thing that I've noticed in my, research is, and also something that I admire about you, is that not only did you kind of go through that experience, but you also kind of turned around after healing, or in the process of healing, and have started building bridges to those who might be going through something similar. Like, you've had the Melanated Guide for Mental Health, you've had the Mental Health Spotlight, you've worked with Kids Help Phone, all the so, and I could go on and on. And so when for you did you really realize, like, what I'm doing is mental health advocacy?
Yeah, I think it took a little bit of time. I was at Jack.org, and so Jack.org still is a phenomenal organization, but they started at Queens. So I was privy to a lot of things that happened in the very beginning. And so watching it grow from the ground up, when I kind of got in through the door, I didn't necessarily see myself as a mental health advocate right away, but slowly, with the experiences I was getting through that organization, it really started to make sense for me. And I think one that even till this day, I can't fully wrap my brain around it, but I got invited to co-host the Global Ministerial Mental Health Summit, the inaugural one, which happened in 2018 in England. And there was a process. There was people who were applying from around the world, and there was other people who had applied within my organization. And I remember they were getting rejection letters, and I'm just waiting there. It's the end, like now the conference is coming up in a month and I get this secret email saying, hey, actually you've been chosen as
Oh, wow.
the advocate who's going to be representing children and youth across the world. And I think that's when I was like, oh, wait, I think I'm doing something. And even then, I had that moment. And once I left Shack.org and moved on to another place, I kind of forgot that that was something that was so important. And it's really funny to me where I have conversations now of people talking about the concept of nothing about us without us.
Yeah.
And that concept was something, of course, it's an old Latin saying that's existed for a really long time, but we helped reintroduce that concept as a pillar for youth mental health in that conference. And I think now, 10 years later, kind of looking back and be like, oh, wow, like something that I kind of said off the cuff with a group of people at this conference has now become a really big part of the mental health movement across the world. And it wasn't just me. There was a group of us that were working together, but I got lucky and I was the one who had to kind of do the speech to all the health ministers. So when we put that out there, I was like, oh, okay, this is what advocacy is. And for me, I think that's also where I started to realize that a lot of advocacy is really storytelling. And so that kind of started to bring in other realms of my existence into it all. And I slowly just started trying different things and finding my own little niche.
Yeah, like even that saying nothing for us without us is not only used in the mental health space, but even in other spaces too. So sometimes I just like to reflect on how the things that may seem quite little to us are actually quite big outside of us as well. Like when you do things that are beyond yourself. And I'm kind of wondering, in terms of being a mental health advocate, because sometimes people might see that as a title and say, oh, like that means you have to be doing a huge amount of stuff, right? Like how you were talking about, you know, what your mom would say to you that, oh, you know, you can't complain about something if you're not doing something about it. Do you think you have to be doing something big to be a mental health advocate?
Absolutely not. I think I've been lucky that I've got to do a few big things, but my real advocacy, I feel like, happens in the smaller moments.
Yeah.
And I think for myself as well, I've always seen it as if you even make a difference in one person's life, that's still a difference made.
Yeah.
And because I saw that for myself, I really started it where, like I said, I saw these two guys talk about their mental health journey and it saved my life. And that power of saving someone's life, I've always seen that. And so, again, like I said, they had no idea who I was. It's an auditorium full of thousands of people. I'm just like a little speck to them, but they changed my whole world. And so I think as well in advocacy, sometimes we often are looking for something else to validate that we are an advocate or that we are an activist in that realm, but recognizing sometimes that happens afterwards. You have no idea who's watching. Most people that I have conversations with are a lot younger than me, and they are only now seeing the stuff that I was putting out there kind of like 5 to 10 years ago. And it was being kind of in that space where you're ahead of the curve. I often use this J. Cole lyric. So
Shout out J. Cole.
Shout out J. Cole. And I will do a non, oh my God, explicit version. What was the word I was looking for? But the concept of his lyric is, he says, sometimes you think that people are lapping you, but really you're ahead of them. And so I often think about this sometimes when you're ahead of the curve and you're on your second lap, people are still on their first, and sometimes you actually have to wait for them to catch up. And I notice that a lot in advocacy realms as well, because oftentimes if you're advocating for something, it probably is because it doesn't exist yet, which means you're ahead of the game. And so you might not see return on your advocacy for a 5 to 10 year period.
Yeah, I mean, like, with those guys that came in to talk to you, like, they don't even know.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, the impact of what they did that day.
Exactly.
But for you, it's, like, such a huge pivotal moment. Yeah, so tell me a little bit about the work you're doing now, because now you're doing some consulting.
Yes. So along the journey, I also found out that I have ADHD. So I work on a lot of different projects, and now I've kind of shifted into, like I said, consulting and a few other realms. But I do consulting in a lot of fun ways. Some of it is more kind of traditional corporate, like program audits and equity audits, et cetera, for as I said, I work as a global inclusion and belonging specialist, so helping organizations make their people feel like they belong there.
Yeah.
And helping that conversation and continuing education throughout. But some fun things, I guess, I got to work on. I have a background in drama as well. And so now I'm actually a community consultant on a new film that's coming out called Jersey Boy. And Jersey Boy is a post 9/11 story about a Sikh Punjabi youth who basically the aftermath of 9/11 and how that affected him and his family. And so I'm joining there as a community consultant to basically, again, how can they make the community feel like they're being seen, that they're being heard? How can we bring this to the right communities? And how can we have a critical conversation about this movie outside of just a film? How can we have a critical mental health conversation about this? Because even though movies are wonderful, I've always seen a really big intersection between the arts and mental wellness. And I think now kind of putting those two together for my work life has been really interesting, and I'm learning so many new things.
Yeah, I mean, when you were telling me about this, I was very excited because I'm like, wow. Like, when you're doing your psychology degree, I'm wondering, like, do you envision that you would be doing stuff like this?
Oh,
in the future?
absolutely not. I did my psych degree. I thought my only option was to be a psychologist.
Yeah.
And then I could not find work after I graduated from my psych degree, and I ended up in recruitment.
Yeah.
So I was working in sales and recruitment and doing stuff. And then what I realized with a psych degree, and actually my husband's a lawyer, and he started telling me this when I was telling him my knowledge. He's like, oh, wow, you're just really good with people. And I was like, oh, yeah, at the end of the day, your psych degree really teaches you how to understand people in different ways. I have a arts-based psych degree, so mine's a little different, and it makes sense for my realm, but there's also like the scientific way, whichever that works. And what I really did with my psych degree was kind of leverage my understanding of people into the roles that I was in. So a lot of my roles, even at Jack.org and in Kids Help Phone and Good to Talk, were always outreach based, which came down to understanding people. And again, I was always the one who was advocating for, hey, this person's not involved in the conversation. Hey, I think we should talk to this. And so my role kind of naturally evolved from outreach into equity and inclusion without me even knowing, because I was the one who was always advocating for those people to have a seat at the table. And then from there, we were able to get really good conversations going. And of course, the world changed a lot. And then the realm of equity and inclusion opened up to, oh, wow, that was a hard sentence. I was like, the realm of equity and inclusion opened up.
I don't think I can say that 3 times fast. No, because 2 things jumped out at me there. One, you're also pulling from these other experiences you have, right, with drama, and now, like, it's also bleeding into the role that you have with the consulting role. But at the same time, when you're growing up, right, and they ask you, what do you want to become? You don't say global equity, and, those aren't really roles that you think of, traditional roles, right? And it's like sometimes how you are as a person, your experiences can actually give rise to a completely new title that never existed before, but now you're doing it.
Exactly. And I think it is like I said, the world changes so much. And I think especially post-COVID, our world has changed so much. And I think even like this was the advice given to me of you graduate, you get yourself into an organization, then you stay with them for a few years and build yourself up. And I just don't know if that's how the world works anymore. And so for myself, I originally thought it was to my detriment. I would get bored of the jobs I was working in about 9 months. Now I know it's the ADHD. But in about 9 months, I would be like, I don't know how I feel about this role. And I'd move on to, even if it was within the organization, I would find something else to do. And it became a really great way to build my own skills, but it also, I feel like I dedicated my 20s to just trying so many different things. I swear I've done every job from selling pest control door to door to a puppy cuddler.
Wow.
It's it's ridiculous. It's like but things that I could try. And I've always been kind of that person where if something sounds fun, I'm in and I'll give it a try. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And no harm, no foul.
How was the puppy cuddling?
So there is a such thing as too many puppies.
Right.
I went in with the theory that there is not. And then they put like a litter of 10 puppies in front of me. I was like, wow, this is great. Then there was 20. Then there was 30 puppies. And I'm like, if I take a step, I might step on a puppy. And I don't know if I could live with myself after that. And so after the 30 puppies, I was like, I think I need to retire.
I need to retire. My number is 30.
Yes, I can do no more than 30 puppies.
Oh my god, I didn't even know that was, again, the more you know. So clearly you're on a mission, right? Making people feel more comfortable talking about their mental health. From your perspective, from the roles that you've had, from people you've spoken to, what seems to be the reasons why people shy away from conversations about mental health?
Yeah, and I think you kind of said it as you were talking of people just don't feel safe. I think it's really hard to talk about mental health if you don't have a safe space to do so, and having a safe space to do so takes time. And I think that's why oftentimes people don't get the help that they need or reach out for the help that they need, because those spaces aren't safe enough for them. And I think also recognizing that what a safe space looks like is different for each individual, and that's really the hard part. And so I think a lot of the work I do is very individual based. I work with a lot of students in different projects, and I'm mentoring a lot of people. And in my mentorship, I swear the first 5 sessions are just creating a safe space. And then from there you can do work. And it's not just when I'm working with people one-on-one. When I was working as an equity and inclusion consultant within organizations as well, if a complaint comes up or someone needs advice, it always starts with building some sort of psychological safety where you can be open. Because I think the other hard part is when it comes to mental wellness and the idea of healing, I think a lot of us aspire to be healed, or to be completely healed, I'll put it that way, which is not a real goal. There's no realm in which you're always going to be at 100% all the time and you're completely healed and nothing's going to bother you or trigger you. And so I think we've made huge strides in the mental health world, but there's still important parts of the conversations that we're missing.
Yeah, for sure. I think what you said about psychological safety is so important, because a lot of the times, and even from what I've heard in my training with clients, is it's similar to kind of what you explained at the beginning, where it's like, if I complain, then there's a consequence, right?
Yeah.
Either I have to do something about it, or, I'm told or I'm asked, why am I complaining, right? And so that's something that we see a lot in certain cultures where, people are shying away from having these conversations. And I know with you, so you already mentioned you got your ADHD diagnosis later on in life. So how was that for you?
Yeah, so I actually got diagnosed with ADHD when I turned 30, a month before I got married.
Oh, wow.
And then I got diagnosed with autism actually a little while later. So I think maybe within 6 months of that whole process. And it was interesting because when I got the diagnosis, I sat there and I threw my hands up in the air. I'm like, oh my God, my whole life makes sense now. And everyone else was like, does it though? Is this real? And I was like, no, I have been struggling my whole life and now my life makes sense after 30. And I know I touched on this a little bit before as well, but for myself, even in hindsight, when my mom tells me stories about myself, from basically when I was born, as a 1-year-old, she'll tell me, oh yeah, you were the worst sleeper. We actually would have to put you in the car seat and then drive you around the block 4 times with a specific song playing. If that's not baby autism, I don't know what is. But there were all these signs, and in the 90s that we weren't talking about those things. And like I said, oftentimes people go unnoticed, either because we don't feel comfortable talking about it. I kind of had the opposite, where I always knew there was something a little different about me, and I felt it on the inside. And I was constantly advocating of, hey, I think there's something going on. And everyone would be like, no, but you look fine. And even doctors, I remember the first time I got my mental health diagnosis, it was on campus, and I remember, and they gave me a diagnosis of major depressive disorder, I think it was called back then, and then generalized anxiety disorder. And I remember being like, oh yeah, depressive disorder, that seems right. But I pushed back on the anxiety diagnosis because I didn't feel anxious at that time. And this was, I was in school and I was having a lot of overwhelm. And now I see I was having ADHD and autistic meltdowns, but I didn't have anxiety back then. But over the years of being misdiagnosed and being like, I have this diagnosis, I'm taking my medication, I'm doing all the things right, but I still feel like life is so hard for me.
Yeah.
And I think when I finally got my diagnosis, it gave me a moment to be like, oh, yeah, I was right all along. Like, you really do know yourself best. And even now, as a 30-year-old, when I was advocating for myself, I went to my doctor. His name's Dr. Singh. And he was the one who gave me my ADHD diagnosis. He was really great at kind of picking up on those things that I was talking about. And then I went back to him and I was like, hey, ADHD totally makes sense, but I think I also might be autistic. And he's like, no, I interact with you all the time. Like, you're fine. And I was like, okay, 1 second. Let me tell you what's mentally happening on the inside. And the fact that I've curated my whole life. I went to drama school so I could be extroverted and talk to people and learn how to act in mannerisms. I literally went to school to learn how to act like a human. And all of these things built the most amazing mask where I built my career as a public speaker. And I have really bad anxiety now because I took anxiety meds for so long when I didn't need them. And so there's so many things that happened. And there was a lot of resistance along the way. And also, I don't really fault anyone for it either, because at the same time, we just didn't know enough. And even as we see with what's going on in the world right now, we still don't know enough about what's happening and just mental wellness in general. And I found myself, as I get older, I start leaning into more holistic practices, more traditional practices, more pre-colonial practices, I would say. And I think that's really made a big difference in my life. And I think that equity and inclusion realm, when I entered into that, and I did the mental health world, then I went and did the equity and inclusion world, and I was like, no, I think these worlds are very related, and we actually shouldn't have these conversations separately.
Yeah, because we do have some issues with equity within mental health spaces as well. And it also sounds like the experience for you was validating, because when you're getting these diagnoses, sometimes they can have adverse effects, but sometimes it can be therapeutic also to hear, like, there is a label for how I've been feeling my whole life, right?
Exactly. And I think it was of like my whole life being told I'm fine. To then be like, no, you're not fine. Like, you have a disability. And it was still of like, I went through a period of time where I was like excited that I had a diagnosis, but really sad that I had a disability. And it was a weird grieving process, because you're grieving something that's been there the whole time. And it's just very odd. But now, kind of being on the other side of it, I see more good in it for myself than I did bad. But like you said, there's so many, like, everyone's different. It could have gone the other way. And that was something I also kind of went into. And I took a really long time to even get the diagnosis now, because I didn't want to overwhelm myself and be like, and I mentally prepared myself too. If at any point I was like, yeah, I just don't want to do this process anymore, I'm out, I'll bounce. And that's something I think to keep in mind as well, if anyone is out there questioning whether they have a diagnosis or need to get diagnosed. It's also, is that something that you want? If you, like, even for myself, I don't take much medication. I have ADHD meds that I use sparingly as needed, but it took me a long time to just even be okay of like, okay, yeah, these are things that like I'm gonna have to change about myself, because I again, like I said, I come from a family of alcoholics. I was so scared. I'm like, what if I get addicted to this? And what's that going to do? And so every individual, I think you slowly find what works for you, but be okay with it being a longer process. I think it's better as a longer process.
And I think those are real considerations, right? Like with your own personal history, family history. But I think also what you're saying is, and the decisions that you're making along the way are even by virtue of when you got the diagnoses, because, you know, if you get this diagnosis at like 16 or 17, you may not think to yourself like, oh, like, do I really want to, you know, be on this medication or, right? And also the spaces that you're in, is this helpful for me at school versus at work, or, right? One of my favorite Instagram creators is at the Brain Coach. I don't know if you're familiar. Her name is Nawal Mustafa. So I think she actually defended her PhD recently.
Ooh.
And so she posts strategies for those struggling with mental health, also for their cognition and more. And she's been really focused on translating some interventions for the South Asian community as well. A couple years ago, she wrote an article and said, the collectivist nature of South Asian culture can feel comforting and supportive with close-knit family ties and a sense of connection to something larger than the self. However, in South Asian families, individuals can also feel pressure to sacrifice their personal desires for the expectations of their family. And I think this is something common across a lot of collectivist cultures. I come from one.
Yeah.
What would you say to those who face resistant attitudes to mental health within their family that are struggling right now?
Yeah, and I think this is something, like you said, it's in a lot of cultures, a lot of immigrant cultures, and collectivist cultures where this comes up. And I think it's recognizing that family ties are important, but what your family looks like is also up to you. And I think I started to realize that more as an adult, more after I got married. I just moved across the country, and that was really difficult for my family, but it was something that me and my husband needed to do to better our lives. And what we realized is sometimes, I think this is in a lot of spaces, the person we consider the black sheep or the one that's doing things that are against the family is often the first person who has the courage to try something new.
Yeah.
Because in our families, intergenerational trauma also runs very deep. I think especially in collectivist cultures, not only do we rejoice and celebrate together, we also feel that pain together. So you're not just collecting and feeling your own pain, you also have that pain from your community. And in that collectivist culture, that's why I think it's so precarious, where you have to see the benefits, and the benefits are huge. I've had such great benefits from having the people in my family and my culture support me, but that's also where I felt more alienated. It's a two-sided coin, and I think it really is looking at it as it's a power and a privilege. And sometimes when you have both power and privilege, you have to take a step back and say, okay, how am I going to use this for the greater good? And what I see for myself is I engage with my collectivist culture as it feels comfortable, but my boundaries have changed a lot. Of my boundaries with my culture and community are very different than someone my mom's age, or even some of my cousins who are in their 40s and a little bit older. And it's also difficult. I get a lot of pushback a lot. I've always been kind of the rebel, and my family, I think, has gotten used to it. And even for my husband, sometimes he came from a very, he's a lawyer. He comes from a very traditional, he spent 12 years in school, and he does things very by the book. That's what law teaches you. And I come from this eclectic, dramatic universe where I'm just doing a million things at once, and then I'll pick and choose. And I realize that even maybe the person who loves you the most, sometimes they're not even going to understand you. And so it's okay if you have those moments, and sometimes you just have to create your own tribe for yourself.
Yeah, and also I think along the way, it sounds like you're also learning how to advocate for yourself bit by bit, especially when those who should be advocating for you aren't strongly doing so.
Yeah, and I think that is the other thing I always kind of rely on is recognizing where people's brains are at. And I think this is something as well coming from immigrants communities that a lot of people can relate to, is oftentimes our parents, they didn't actually mature to the ages that they're at. They kind of got stuck in the time where they had a lot of responsibility, and they don't see that the world has changed a lot since then. And I see it with my mom sometimes. She'll be like, why are you quitting your job? And she's like, why are you freelancing? You had a job with a pension and all these things. And I'm like, yeah, Mom, but I actually make way more money freelancing, and my sanity is cut better. And now that I know about all of the different ways my mental health is affected by my different diagnoses, I've built a life where I can take care of my mental health. I can still make money. I can be with my family. I can travel. I can do fun things. But health has to be kind of the most important thing for me. And in a collectivist culture, that's not allowed.
Right.
It's usually the group and the culture and the collective is the most important thing, and everything else comes after. And there's a balance too of, we've seen what it's like when we're a fully individualistic culture, like a lot of the westernized cultures are. And so it is, you kind of have to make space for both.
Yeah. Two things can be true at once, right? Now, I know there are psychology students tuning in. And I know you're also an alum yourself from a psychology program. So what would you say to those that are listening who are just starting out? Maybe they're also trying to figure out what their path should look like.
Yeah, I think I would have two pieces of advice. One, don't be afraid to take a job that's not in your field. Like I said, for a while when I graduated, I just took any job that I could find because I had OSAP to pay off, and that's okay. And it took me almost like, I would say probably 3 or 4 years after I graduated to really get into a field that I enjoyed and that was more aligned with my psych degree, etc.
Yeah.
And I think that's a normal transition that happens to a lot of people. I think as well, don't be afraid to make your own opportunities. I think that's something that now people are doing a lot more. I didn't see it as much back when I had graduated, but I think a lot of the opportunities that I've had, I've really made for myself. I kind of go out on a limb and I'll either cold email someone or I'll just be like, there's no project like this out there. Let me just put it together. You don't need a lot of funding. You don't need a lot, especially now with social media. You can really start your own project and put it out there in the world really quickly. And as well, I think collaborating. I think that's something that has been kind of going down in the last few years, but working with other people and even volunteering with other organizations. Like, truthfully, I got my job at jack.org while I was still working in recruitment, but I was volunteering for jack.org. I was doing volunteer presentations for them. And then the boss was like, you know, you seem very passionate about this. Would you ever consider doing this full time? And I said, please let me do this.
Yeah,
and the rest is history. And then from there, my career just kind of kept growing. I just needed that one foot in the door. And I think that happens in very different ways. And as well, I think when you're graduating from university, college, post-secondary, whatever it is, give yourself a break first before you even go into the career world. I think this is something I didn't do. And in hindsight, I look back and I'm like, oh my God, I wish I had. But even taking a few months to do just a fun job, to transition yourself out. I think our brains use up so much power during school, and then work is a very different beast, and we don't give ourselves enough time to transition into that. And I think that can kind of really set you up to struggle if you don't take the time to unwind from one thing before you jump into the next.
No, that's great advice. That was a lot of things, actually. Yeah, for me, when I graduated, this kind of happened in a very unplanned way where I did get a little break to do something, which to me was fun. Like, I was working at Lululemon, actually. Yeah. And like, that was because I had to also change my CV for more retail because, like you were saying, don't be afraid to work in a field that isn't right. Like, if you're interested in going to grad school, it doesn't mean every single job that you do has to align with grad school, right? So, no, like, thank you so much for those pieces of advice. Like, you inspire me. And I think for those who tune in, they're also going to be inspired by the work that you've done, that you are still doing. And so let us know what's next for you. Where are you hoping to go?
Yes.
And where can we find you?
Yes. So you can find me on LinkedIn or on Instagram at Jessie Sidhu. And I just, like I said, moved across the country. So I'm in BC now, and I'm kind of starting from the ground up. I have a few projects, like I said, that I'm working on that are super fun. So I'm consulting for a film, consulting on some music industry stuff, which is really cool. And really, I'm just bringing that mental health lens into those spaces. And I'm excited to see where that goes. This is my first time. Again, like I said, I change things up pretty often. So I'm in a new field with the same vibe that I bring. And I think that is really what it comes down to, of I am who I am. And any space I go into, I bring all of those skills with me. And whatever space I'm in, I'll adapt to that. So I'm excited to see where the next 6 months to a year go. But I'm enjoying the island life for now. I'm also in kind of my break mode. I'm taking it slow.
Okay. No, I'm excited for you. And so if you want to stay updated, you heard her. To our listeners, if you had any thoughts about this episode, feel free to send us a message or an email if you'd like. Our email is thebraincorepodcast@gmail.com. You can also let us know what you thought about this episode in the comments. We're also on Instagram at thebraincore podcast. Make sure to give us a follow. Make sure to subscribe to our channel. And what do you want to hear from us next? You can let us know. And thank you so much for listening. And we hope you are having a great brain day.